Can see the slides, Prabhuji?
Yes, Mataji, very clear.
Yes, Mataji.
Okay, so I'll just start. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Dandavat Pranam to all the devotees. My topic is applying rules according to time and place. In the context of Srila Prabhupada's application of Narada's instructions in establishing Iskcon in the West. So I will be very briefly discussing about the consideration of time, place, and circumstances. What are these three, elements? And we will see from Chaitanya Charitamrita as to how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself actually, portrayed and took a decision of taking sannyas in context with the time, place, and circumstances. And we will see in our own personal life as to what some of the challenges that we face and how we have to take decisions with respect to time, place, and circumstances. And lastly, we will be reading few letters from Srila Prabhupada, where he has actually written to his disciples how to actually conduct the preaching activities and establish Krishna consciousness as per the time, place, and circumstances. So if you see these three parameters, these three elements, time, place, and circumstances, Desha, Kala, and Patra. Desh is a situation, Kal is a time, and Patra is a subject or individual in the question. So these three parameters, Desha, Kala, and Patra, has to be considered before taking any decisions in life. So what is true in one particular time may not be true at a particular another set of time. Similarly, what is true in a particular situation may not always be true, or it may be wrong in a particular situation. So for example, a very crude example I'll give. For example, singing for an entertainment could be true. But if we are singing in front of a person who is very sick or in the bed, that will considered or transformed into a wrong action or a bad behavior. Similarly, offering, cold drink at night in the very cold weather would be actually taken reluctantly by a person. But if you are offering that particular same cold drink in a, very hot sunny day, that will be gladly accepted by the person. So these three considered, from this particular example, we can see that is what is called wrong action when people do not know how to adjust according to time, place, and circumstances. So the most appropriate way is to adjust ourselves, our actions, taking into these three elements into consideration. Also, if you see in our modern age, some adjustments from the traditional standards are unavoidable if we want to practice Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, some of the practice become difficult. For example, if we see deity worship, as per the Vedic injunctions, it is said that we should use holy water or very pure water for deity worship, for all the process of deity worship. But if you see nowadays, the tap water which becomes is normally recycled stool water, or we can say we have UV purifier and all that stuff. But still, we cannot consider as per the Shastras that these are the holiest of the holiest or the pure water. So we have to make some adjustments here. Similarly, we say that we have to offer the best fruits and vegetables to offer to Krishna. But nowadays, we practically don't get any pure vegetables and fruits, which is normally infected with, poison or pesticides or intoxicated, basically. And also, some of the principles of devotional service are very important, which cannot be violated. But some of them are very less important, which can be adjusted. So, for example, when there is a principle that we need to, circumambulate the deities in the temple when we visit. So some temples are designed in such a way that practically it is not possible to take pradakshina of the deities, because some temples are not designed or structured in a way as a temple. Similarly, another consideration could be, should we eat prasad made by non-devotees? For the prospect of preaching, we have to actually question ourselves whether the prospect of preaching, and we have to weigh that particular prospect of preaching and the success of preaching compared to whether we should violate this particular rule. So that's very subjective, and that needs to be considered, taking in consideration maybe the authority, and take decisions accordingly. Prabhupada says in one of the lecture, according to
Mataji, sorry, your slide is not changing.
which slide is it?
It
You
is
are
in
able to
front page only. First page only it is there. First slide.
Oh, okay. Just a second. You told me quite late.
I thought you are briefing and introducing.
No, no. Everything is on the slide. So, can you hear me? Can you see now? If I do not do
Yes,
this,
yes, yes, yes,
yeah. So
yes.
I'll not do the slideshow. So you'll be able to see. I guess when I do the slideshow, it is not visible.
Yeah.
So one of the lecture Prabhupada says, according to time, according to circumstances, according to the subject, everything is scrutinizingly judged, not whimsically. We must understand everything by taking these three elements into consideration. Another lecture Prabhupada says that it may be that the Hindus may be following the same principle in a different way, or the Christian may be following the same principle in different way. That is called Desha Kala Patra. According to time, atmosphere, and performer, there may be a little difference, but we are keeping our principles as it is, but making arrangement according to the circumstances. Now you can see the change of slide, right?
Yes, Mataji.
Okay. So we will go to the particular example of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So there are many scholars, many religionists who actually argue that why did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas in the line of Mayavad? And there are some misunderstanding that people have that he took sannyas in the line of Mayavad because there was no, Vaishnav's line of sannyas available at that time. But Prabhupada says that this is a misunderstanding. Vaishnav sannyasa was present even before the time of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we will see why, what are some of the reasons, very strong reasons as to how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu considered time, place, and circumstances, and then he took a decision of changing the ashram from grahastha to sannyasa, and taking the, sannyas order in the line of Mayavad. So very first example is the appearance of Shankaracharya. That was a very recent appearance of Shankaracharya at that time, and people were taking Mayavad philosophy, and there was a prominence of Mayavadis and the sannyasis that particular time. So this is one of the reason why he took sannyas here. Also, there was an unfavorable political ruling, unlike in the Yuga of Dwapar, where Krishna actually had come, and at that time Yudhishthir Maharaj was ruling, so there was no issues with the ruling or the favorable ruling parties who helps to advance in Krishna consciousness, or helps in spreading Krishna consciousness and preaching Krishna consciousness. So the Muslims were in rule at that time, so that's the reason he took sannyas. And also changing the ashram from grahastha to a sannyas, because that at that time sannyasis anyways are very very much respected, and that was the prominence at that particular time. And as a sannyasi, he would be free to preach and travel, and considering that particular factor, he gauged that particular situation, and then he took a decision to change the ashram. Also, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took a very strategical decision, basically, to actually take the sannyas in the line of Mayavadis, because his target was Mayavadis. He wanted to actually transform the Mayavadis into Vaishnavas, and if he had taken the sannyas order in the Vaishnava line, he would have become the opponent immediately to the Mayavadis. So if he had taken the sannyas order in the line of Mayavad, there is a common ground of understanding between the Mayavadis and the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and they probably cannot deny that he is one of them. And unless the Mayavadis or the Mayavadi philosophy is uprooted, Bhaktilata beach cannot be, established. So that's a very strategic move that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took, considering the time, place, and circumstances at that particular time to preach. So this is one of the very, very great example of Desh Kala Patra from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela. Next, same thing, we have to apply time, place, and circumstances in our own personal lives and make adjustments. And we have to see what is favorable for our Krishna consciousness, what could be favorable for other Krishna consciousness to grow and advance. So we have to reflect from the individual level and the collective level. For example, if you see some devotees choose to become a grahastha, or they want to take up the grahastha ashram, considering their own age, different situations, their modes of nature, and they consider that they would be safe in Krishna consciousness if they become a grahastha. And there are others who consider that being a brahmachari would be the safest option for them to actually advance in Krishna consciousness. So basically, it's not that which ashram is better than the other. It's not the question of ashram, but it's the question of whether one can advance in Krishna consciousness in one or the other ashrams. Next is there something called principles and preference. So if you see, Srila Prabhupada actually did some changes. She adjusted many things. Like he did something in a particular way here and another way there. So he was asked basically whether devotees should wear a civil dress or should wear a dhoti kurta during book distribution or preaching. So he was okay with both. So that was his preference. So he did not said that this is a principle and you have to follow this. So he was okay with both. So similarly, we have to decide what is the best decision according, weighing the prospect and the success of preaching. Similarly, when we are preaching, we have to also consider whether how much time should we give to a person who may turn hostile in front of us while preaching. How much time should we give? How much time should give attention to the particular person? Similarly, the same point, whether we should eat food, prepared by karmis or non-devotees. So we have to consider the prospect of preaching by weighing its success and decide whether we should actually violate this particular very important principle of eating food by non-devotees. So now if you see this our Vedic this Vedic knowledge and culture is timeless, and it goes back to the time of our creation, where Brahma was directly instructed by Lord Krishna at the time of creation. So it is a challenge actually to apply the age-old culture and this knowledge in the modern life. So while applying these Vedic principles of culture and etiquette, Srila Prabhupada was emphatic that people's sentiments should not be hurt. Rather, it should be given in compliance with people's feelings, customs, culture, according to time, place, and circumstances. So we will read few Prabhupada's letters and lectures, and these are some of the theme of those particular letters, and we will try to see what we can learn from these particular letters that Prabhupada has written to his disciples. The first one is Srila Prabhupada explains how the acharyas knows how to adjust things, at the same time keep pace with spiritual interest. So now Srila Prabhupada here talks about his Guru Maharaj, like how he had allowed the first time that he allowed the sannyasis to drive in a motor car, which usually is not allowed. Similarly, sannyasis are also not allowed to go and spread or maybe travel from one continent to another. That's the Vedic scriptures that's mentioned. But Srila Prabhupada, for the sake of preaching, he went, and that's how we actually got Krishna consciousness, because of his mercy and violating this so-called principle that we talk about. And also here he talks about how these Goswamis, they went to Vrindavan the severest type of austerities. He said that uh, nobody is accustomed to that way, such severe type of austerity. They must be given as far as possible comfortable accommodation. Otherwise, they will not come. They will not take. So this is adjustment. So the acharyas knows how to adjust things. So the real purpose is how one will take to Krishna consciousness or Krishna consciousness. So he is talking about how Acharya knows to adjust things, and Acharya is the one who can adjust things as per time, place, and circumstances. Second, I think I missed one letter. Just a second. Yeah. So there's a one letter that he wrote to Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So I have seen the agenda of your president's meeting. This is nice. One thing should be followed. However, as your countrymen are more or less independent spirited and lovers of democracy, so everything should be done very carefully so that their sentiments may not be hurt. According to Sanskrit moral principles, everything has to be acted, taking consideration of place, audience, and time. As far as possible, the center should act freely but conjointly. They must look forward to common development. That should be the principle. So here, if you see, while applying Krishna consciousness to the Western countries, Srila Prabhupada was considered the mentality of people, and he was propagating Krishna consciousness in the Western country through these Western disciples. So he was particular that it should be given according to their nature. And since people in the West, as he has mentioned, that they are independent minded and they are fond of democracy, so the Krishna consciousness application also should be democratic. So if you see in the other hand, in the Vedic context, we see it is rather very autocratic. And and we see, although in Iskcon, Srila Prabhupada was the head of the institution, he wanted to apply the mood of democracy in establishing our movement. So here, if you see in the letters, so since devotees were independent minded and they wanted to do things in a democratic way. So he said, okay, don't lose the essence, don't lose the essence, but do in such a way that people feel comfortable, and he wanted to stick to the principles. But its application, he was very, comfortable, and he was ready to compromise how its application should be done. And it could be as per the, compatibility with the time, place, and circumstance. So the mood was rather democratic. Also in this regard, there is an example, I just remember that Harikesh Maharaj was once sent to Russia for preaching, and he could not stay there for a long time. So he said that he came back very early. So Prabhupada asked that, why did you come back? So he said, Prabhupada, there is no association there. So Prabhupada said, association or no association, you should somehow or the other preach. Then he said another excuse that, I can't speak the language. So Prabhupada said, you speak or you don't speak, first try to induce and preach Krishna consciousness in this local people there. Then he said, there's nothing to eat, Prabhupada. There's only meat that we get. So he said, you eat meat, but you still preach and spread Krishna consciousness. So it's not that Srila Prabhupada wanted his disciples to preach, eat meat, but the consideration was irrespective of the local situation. He said, just try to preach and spread Krishna consciousness. Second is packaging the message differently while maintaining the spirit of parampara. That's one of the theme of his letter that he wrote to Shivanand. It is important that we preach the message of Krishna consciousness exactly as we have heard it from our spiritual master. The same philosophy and spirit must be there exactly. Just like we preach in this country exactly as we have heard from our spiritual master. But there are changes due to time, circumstances, and trainees. The spirit of disciplic succession may not be changed, but there may be adjustments made to suit special circumstances. So here again, we see that Prabhupada was emphatic about the teachings, that it should not be altered. Rather, it should be actually presented in such a way that it becomes conducive to both the newcomers and the recipients or the trainees, which actually come new in the system of maybe in Iskcon. Then another letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote is the students are taught by the spiritual master or the teachers, and the students themselves go from door to door for begging alms. And because everyone's son is in the ashram, nobody declines to give alms. So there is no financial difficulty at all. But I do not know what to do in your country. There are so many laws, we have to adjust things to the circumstances. So in India, there is no issues with begging because that's the culture, part of culture. But in the West, it may be difficult and it may be objected. So as per considering the laws, Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada said objected may not be, and it may be objected. So Prabhupada was not very adamant on these particular points. Now, next letter that Prabhupada wrote to Upendra Prabhu, we must stick to our Krishna consciousness business at all circumstances. This determination will make us successful. Although according to Vedic system, there is a restriction that boys and girls should not freely mix, the brahmacharis are strictly prohibited to talk with young women. But in the Western countries, this rule is not valid. As such, we have to accept both boys and girls in the same standard. But each of us follow the regulative principles, and chanting of the mantras hardly there will be chance for sex indulgence. So we have to be little careful about it, and Krishna will help us. And continuing the same point, he wrote to Rupanuga Prabhu, regarding marriage, generally the man should be older than the woman. We have had not good experience with marriages when woman is older, but everything must be done with reference to time, place, and circumstance. And in your country, such a marriage is not uncommon. If you think the match is good, then you may marry them. Another letter he wrote, the new procedures to Karandhara Prabhu, the new procedures you are instituting on Sankirtan party are very encouraging to me. The opportunities for expanding the Sankirtan movement are unlimited. We should tax our brains as to what is the best way to present Krishna consciousness to particular people at a particular time and place. I have always thought that in LA there should be at least 10 Sankirtan parties going on simultaneously. Then another letter to Karandhara Prabhu. He wrote that I have received your letter concerning polygamy and feel that this policy must be strictly prohibited within our society. If it is not, it shall only cause chaos, as what was possible under the system of pure Vedic culture is impossible at the present time. So from these three, four letters which are read, we can see that Srila Prabhupada made changes when it was necessary or maybe conducive to actually spread Krishna consciousness or promote Krishna consciousness. Whenever there is a sort of detriment and maybe it could be objected, he actually said that it should not be done. Like for example, he said in the previous letter that free mixing of girls and boys in the Vedic culture is not at all allowed basically. But in the West, they mix very freely. So it will be practically impossible for them, for Prabhupada actually to segregate them. So he said he was okay with them with that, but he said you strictly follow the 4 regulative principles, chant Hare Krishna, and although the men and women are mixing, there won't be any illicit relationship. Similarly, in another letter, in the other letter when he said regarding the polygamy, so another consideration was where man can have more than one wife. In Vedic times, it was allowed, but Prabhupada saw that in the West, this culture is the culture is different, the laws are different. So he did not allow Krishna consciousness the polygamy. He did not allow that. So that's how he considered these parameters. Third, capable management means improvising without compromising. So he wrote a letter to Yogeshwar Prabhu. So we have to adjust things. Everything is important, not that we have to do something at the expense of something else. I cannot say from here what is to be given preference. That depends on your management capacity. So we see that Prabhupada not always wanted to dictate, He gave freedom to the disciples as to what has to be done. He gave them freedom to decide and use their intelligence and experiences, and as to how it should be applied while preaching. And he also said that they should not also consider that something should be accepted at the expense of the something else. So he said that important factors should remain, and people he should make adjustments even if there are some contradictions or if there is some difficulty. This particular point, that you have to do something, that was made clear in a particular letter that he wrote to Badrinaran Maharaj. So he said, regarding your proposal to accommodate more indoor engagements for Sankirtana and thus to avoid severe cold of winter time, it is a nice proposal. And I'm encouraged to hear that you're always thinking of how to improve the program of your St. Louis temple. We should always be thinking of how to spread the Sankirtan movement by applying our basic principles according to time and place. And I especially want that my students enter into the schools and colleges and present our Krishna philosophy and sell our books. So he was okay with the idea that we should actually go and preach indoors during the winter time, because it was practically not possible to actually move out in the cold and the snow time in the west. And another is purity and not packaging is our core preaching strategy. And this is a beautiful letter that Prabhupada actually wrote. Uh, Please accept my blessings. I beg to acknowledge your letter along with the copies of your advertising work, slides, and Dutch DBTG. I am very pleased to see that the foreign literature is being produced nicely under your enthusiastic supervision. Just try to increase more and more our output of such books and magazines in many languages. I don't think there is a need to divert your attention by producing advertising. I have seen your advertisements as shown to me by Sham Sundar, and I think you have made the thing less important. This kind of ad is not good. It is not grave. Our process is to show Krishna consciousness as it is, not as others want to see it. By showing Krishna consciousness in this way, you are making the thing less important. It is not that we should change to accommodate the public, but that we should change the public to accommodate us. So here see that we can see that Srila Prabhupada was very emphatic about the essence of our movement, essence of our purpose. The principles is the main consideration here, and teaching of Krishna consciousness is main consideration. So it's not that in order to promote Krishna consciousness somehow or the other we should water it down or make it cheap. And Srila Prabhupada is saying here that uh, we should not compromise the principles in order to make it accepted by people. Rather, we should change people so that they accept our philosophy and principles. Because our principle is the purest, is the purest that we have received from our parampara. So Srila Prabhupada never compromised on principles. He said that if he even said that if instead of 4 regulative principles, he had only 3 regulative principles, he would have actually had more thousands and thousands of more disciples to join the movement. But he did not compromise, and he said he can't compromise because dharma stands on 4 legs. Otherwise, the purpose may get lost. So this is some teachings that we learn from Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much. This is it from my end regarding this topic.
Can you go to the first 2 slides, Adai?
Yes. This one?
One above that, before that. Something I saw. Go before that. Before that?
Before that is just a start. So I think maybe this one.
Okay.
This one maybe.
Okay. So, anyone has any question?
Mataji, I have one
Yes,
question.
yes,
Very
please.
nice presentation, a very relevant presentation to present circumstances, I will say. Because within our community, lot of views we find, even within temple or across the temple, for changing something or other, and they quote some references and they say, as per time, circumstances, and space, we should accommodate these things. And views difference we find within our community. What is your views,
Yeah,
Mataji?
absolutely.
What is your view, Mataji, as per this? What we
Actually,
should do?
I'm not qualified to answer this and my views on this, but I think that we are very neophyte. So in case if a person has a doubt regarding what is to be done, whether the principles has to be strictly followed or we can do some adjustment, it is better to ask the person, maybe from your authority or maybe from a particular person whom you know actually do not uh, you know do not waver with the principles, and he's a practical person, or he or she's a practical person, and he knows that what can be adjusted, what cannot be adjusted. Now I myself have if you see this, my point here, that whether we should eat food prepared by non-devotees. If you see Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is a beautiful verse which says that agar हमने प्रसाद लिया non-devotees के हाथ का, so you become contaminated, and when you are contaminated you cannot think about Krishna. But now if you see, there are certain preaching programs or certain programs that we have to go, and it becomes unavoidable, completely unavoidable, because we can't starve, we have to eat something. So this is a very important principle according to the Shastras and what we have read in Chaitanya Charitamrita. But we consider that it is not always, it is not because of lust, or it is not because of our taste we are taking. This is just one particular circumstances that we have arrived in, and then we have to take that decisions accordingly. So we have to judge accordingly, and also we can ask our authority whether we should do this or not, whom you feel that is following the standard of Krishna consciousness.
Wonderful, Mataji. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
The other day I was looking at, I think it was a podcast between Chaitanya Charan Prabhu and one South African devotee, Govardhan Prabhu. So there he was saying, Govardhan Prabhu was saying how in the history of religions, in the history of religious movements, majority of the movements die out within the 4 years after setting up. And remaining few stay for less than 25 years. So very few organizations stay beyond 25. Institutionalized religion, like Catholic Church is institutionalized, Islam is kind of institutionalized, Hinduism is not institutionalized, but we have now organizations within the Hinduism that have institutions. So Iskcon is like an institutionalized religion, and Iskcon has survived more than 25. Now we are 55, right? 55 years old, our organization. So that way we have gone well beyond the regular age, even though the founder Acharya is physically not present. So usually an organization survives as long as the founder is there, one leader is there. And once the leader passes away, then there is conflict and fighting among members, and then it becomes wishy-washy organization. They compromise the principles. But our movement is growing, and it's expanding. New temples are coming up. So every Prabhupada's time, we had maybe 108 centers. Now we have more than 500 centers. And if you include farm communities and other projects, it goes well beyond 1,000. So that way, it's a positive sign for our movement. Although there may be so many challenges we are facing, but still the movement is expanding, number of devotees joining are expanding, and our reputation as an organization is expanding. But he was addressing the point that we need to be addressing future issues. Like for example, there are so many passages in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada's purports, where people can get offended, especially about women. Our fourth canto purport, expert at rape, all those statements. And women are less intelligent, and women have to be submissive, and about Varnashram, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, all those statements. So he was referring to one website, I think a Russian website, UK people had set up a website that was talking about, that was saying, Bhagavad Gita is a very great book, but if you have this copy of the Gita, Prabhupada's Gita, then don't read it, because the book is racist, all those things. So he was saying, unfortunately, none of us have addressed that issue. No Iskcon leader, Iskcon member, Iskcon organization, or the GBC have attempted to counter it. And the website is in a prominent place. It's a reputed website, and it's open for everyone to read. The point he was making is we have to be relevant as time progresses. We need to be addressing the future issue. Otherwise, it can ruin our movement. Anyway, so since you made this point about relevance and time, place, circumstance, I thought I just remembered this thing. Okay, thank you so much, Mataji, for a nice, important presentation. I hope everyone benefited out of it. Okay, so we are done for the day. And tomorrow we have our